Welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Isabel. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, and many of you will also know that I'm also an astrologer. And I am joined today by Evelyn Rysdyk, who is going to tell us all about shamanic creativity. Welcome, Evelyn.
Thanks for having me, Anna.
Well, as of course, because you've written this book about shamanic creativity, I was curious to look at your birth chart, what the telltale signs were that this was there in you. And lo and behold, the very first thing, of course, is that you're a Taurus, which
Yes.
I consider to be a very creative sign, ruled by Venus. And you also have Libra rising, also ruled by Venus. So your chart ruler is Venus, which I think means that Venus is all about beauty and artistry, etc. And Taurus is about that, but Taurus is an earth sign too. And so I think what you have here is the typical manifestation of creative energy through an eye for beauty. And I can see the beautiful jacket you're wearing, all that color. But also understanding that creativity is something that is an energy, a force in itself, which I think is very Taurus. It's not something you can put into words, that you can articulate. It's just a power, a force in itself. And it being an earth sign, the power of nature. So how do you see that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think of creativity as creative energy, and it's available in all of us. But unfortunately, Western culture, including your side of the pond, it tends to monetize the products of creativity. So unless somebody's making something that is seen by those experts as worthy of cash, then they assume that they're not creative. And that has been, I think, a great blow to humanity as a whole, but particularly here in Western culture, because creativity is a life force. It's part of what's made us who we are. We're resourceful, we're innovative, we're imaginative. All those things are onboard technology for all of us. And now that we're facing a global challenge, bigger than anything we've ever had to handle, we need all the creativity of as many of us who are willing to awaken that as is possible. We need innovation. We need people to use their full imagination to bring forth a future that is caring and protective for all species, nurturing for all species. And in terms of my own chart and my own self, I was originally a professional artist. The first half of my life was visual art. And then in the late 90s, I had a health challenge and I couldn't get up into my studio because I had had surgery. So I started to just write down some thoughts. And that became my first book, a little skinny book, but my first book. And I discovered that I had a different way to express myself. And along with that, I had a shamanic practice that started in the early 90s. So in expanding consciousness for now over 3 decades, I found that my creativity grew exponentially. It just took off so that I had available to me the internal resource, the imagination, the drive, because I think creativity sort of pushes you all the time. And it's not an uncomfortable push. What it does is kind of get you to ride. It's like a horse giving you the head. It's like, come on, let's go. And that energy just wants to express itself through you, through each one of us. And, when you ride it like a horse and you have honed some of your skills, you can really have an extraordinary experience of living. So that, what you said about my chart, I think is pretty fascinating in that it really does talk about who I am as a person and how the book kind of came to be.
There's more too, and it's just listening to you. There's so many threads I want to pull, but I think I'm going to look at your chart to decide which one, and then that leads me to the shamanic side of things and the expansion of consciousness. So because I think that's excuse me, very much at the heart of everything. And we were talking about how Libra is rising in your chart and Venus is your chart ruler, but right next to your ascendant, your rising sign, is Neptune. And Neptune it's about being able to connect with the whole of creation and seeing it as one. And when I say the whole of creation, I don't mean exclusively this beautiful planet we're on. It's all consciousness, the creator. And that's what Neptune wants to do, is connect with everything. So it seems to me that combined with being a Taurus is going to lead you to want to explore shamanic practices. And if that wasn't enough, there's just so much, because your 9th house, which is the house where we look for meaning, has got Mars in it. Mars is about action. So you're going to be active in searching for meaning. Jupiter is there, seeking to expand everything. And it's in Cancer as well, which I think is very nurturing. And so it's about looking for that creative force and using it to nurture. Taurus and Cancer, I think, just two of the most nurturing, in fact, probably the two most nurturing signs of the zodiac, off the top of my head. And so you have that magnified there by Jupiter. So I can see exactly why you would want to go into the shamanic side of life.
Well, actually, I came to shamanism as part of an extreme depression in my 30s, as many people have, that hitting the wall in their 30s where, is that all there is? And the shamanic journey process fascinated me because I had read Michael Harner's book the decade before, and there was something about it that just, makes all the little hairs stand up. And I had loved different kinds of native indigenous sculptures and indigenous artwork. So it seemed like a good place to go, and I took that program. I liked it so much, I wound up taking a lot of training with Michael Harner. And that experience, the very first journey I had, depression has this feeling of, I'll use another horse analogy today. My middle sister, I must be channeling, she has horses. The horse that pulls the cart has those blinders on the side of their tack. So they just see the road ahead. And depression did that for me. It sort of narrowed my vision, narrowed my vision in a way that was incredibly uncomfortable. And the first journey, I had this experience of the blinders being pulled away, that possibility opened again, not specific possibility, which I would have liked at that time, but the feeling of possibility coming back. And I said, whatever this is, I need to do more of this, because it's working a whole lot better than psychotherapy and medication to help me sleep and all those other Western ways of doing things. So that and developing relationships with my great great grandmother as a teacher and my power animal, those spirits help to unlock not just doors to all that is, but doors to me. And that continues to exhilarate me. It continues to amaze me. It continues to fill me with the energy for life. And what I discovered is that opening up of self continues through the opening up more and more and more of my own creativity. I mean, there are not enough hours in the day to express my creativity. And, you know, we have all these different things set up around the house for me to do what it is I need to do. So it's a glorious ride. And what I love about all of it is everybody can learn to do these things because we're wired for extraordinary experience. We're wired for that. We're wired to be creative. And most people don't have the opportunity, because they haven't learned how to do that safely, to step into the fullness of who they are. And you know, you talked about nurturing. One of my nicknames is Shamama, or Shamama Bear, given to me by my students. I think it's because I have a 6-foot wingspan and I give a good hug. That nurturance of people, to awaken them to their magnificence, really. I mean, every human being has this capacity for extraordinary things. And to me, it feels like such a waste if we don't open that up.
You were talking about the horse and the blinkers and, you know, opening up, and I was just, when you said that, I thought, oh, what's Saturn doing in your chart? Because Saturn is about restriction, and, you know, it's a very linear way of looking at things. A follows B, I mean, B follows A, and so on. And sitting there in your first house, which is the house with your child, to do with childhood. And so I suspect that perhaps your upbringing, there was a level of discipline and a level of must-dos and rules that needed to be followed. Would that be the case?
Absolutely. I'm half Norwegian American, second generation on my mother's side, and my father's side is largely German. So yes, discipline was really important. Hard work was really important. But by the way, both my parents are Tauruses, and I'm the eldest child. So there was a little headbutting along the way. The beauty is, though, those two people who brought me into the world also are creative in their own way. My father was a brilliant mechanic, and he could build hot rods and cars from the ground up. And as the eldest child, I was his helper. And my mother has the capacity to make clothing without a pattern, you know, figure out how to make clothing and do all these extraordinary things, and actually drew a good deal when she was in high school. She also played the piano when she was young. So there was creativity in the framework of a blue collar family. You know, so that hard work was valued very heavily. Both of my parents wound up participating in unions. My mother actually started one. So that feeling of wanting to lift people up is clearly a thread in the family as well.
The other thing that really struck me when I was reading just the introduction was that you were talking about shamanism being about balancing energy. And I think that Libra ascendant, you know, the scale, the balancing really is about harmony, and having your own energy and harmony, being in harmony with others, being in harmony with the world, that's so Venusian, and I can completely see that this is something that would really appeal to you. But I can also see that there is so much wisdom in that principle, and that just about every tradition in terms of healing traditions holds that principle as key, that it's about having harmony. If you're ill, there's an imbalance, and how can we address that imbalance? And if there's a relationship that's going wrong, there's an imbalance. How can we fix that? And clearly, right now, we are experiencing imbalance globally in huge ways. It's the imbalance that's created by the overvaluing of certain things over others. It's the extraordinary authoritarian force that's being brought to bear on all of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a real stifling, a strangling of life, it feels like, that's operating all around the world. Talk to us about hope.
Well, first of all, I have a way to think about this that I think is helpful. If you talk about that balance, sometimes it has to go all the way out to the very edges. I forget what the English term is for a seesaw.
It's a seesaw.
It's still the same. Okay. I have an English friend, and she got me up to speed over the years on my British English. So sometimes you have to slide things all the way out to the very end to find that balance. And that's certainly what's happening on my side of the pond, I can tell you, because we have such a division between people who have a progressive vision and people who have a reactionary or regressive agenda. And so I think sometimes it has to be so obvious to us about what the problems are before we can go, well, that's not working. You know, it's painful to be a witness of it and an inadvertent participant in it. And yet there is some sense to me in why it has to be so obviously that way. When people recognize that, I think if you go out far enough, you begin to come back around the circle. And that idea of coming back around, you know, I always say we live in a time when that split between things like the rational sciences and metaphysical things, spiritual things, they split, but they didn't realize that the paths were curved, and they're coming back together. And so we're experiencing this kind of tearing apart into two separate factions. But nature doesn't do straight lines. Nature always has curves. And so as we see the extremity of where we are, then we have an opportunity to come back together. And I think our planet is going to be the unifying force. It's going to be hard on that divisive scale, because there's going to be too much for a non-unified group to be able to handle. And an authoritarian regime will not be able to organize people from a place of heart, because we're also in a time when the heart is becoming much more prominent. So, you know, it's all the cards are up in the air as far as I'm concerned. And who knows if I'll live to see how it all turns out. But to me, it has that feeling of chaos that happens before a new kind of order comes. You know, it's like all the pieces are jagged and you can't possibly see how anything's going to go together. And then suddenly, click, it works. And so that's the phase we're in. And we have to have courage at this time. We have to have our creativity turned on. We have to be able to hold on to the vision of possibility without clutching at it. You know, there's the idea of letting go of outcome, dreaming something into being, holding the vision of possibility, but to hold it with a light touch. So it still has the possibility of evolving into something even better.
I love the seesaw because you're right. That is what happens. And if the so-called progressive side is going into territory that now becomes regressive, then the so-called regressives need to be there to pull them back. So it's a check of the extremes, and you can see that happening, beginning to happen. So I also like the reminder that everything, you know, is in curves. You're right, that is the case. So because we understand that we are one, and therefore the small thing that I do has a ripple effect in the world around me. And it's easy to see how you can do that. You know, if you are pleasant to somebody, that helps them, hopefully. And that means that they will be in a better frame of mind. And rather than upsetting somebody else, they're going to be helping somebody else, etc., etc. So we can do that on a physical level, but at an energy level, this is also hugely important. So how can we perform some hygiene on ourselves to help us to stimulate that creative flow that is really the source of joy, which will then have a beautiful effect on raising the energy that's going to help the planet and ourselves?
Well, I think the first thing is to recognize that you have it on board already. You know, it's not some gift that has been bestowed on you like a title that only certain people get to be creative. You know, it's not, it doesn't work that way. You know, if our ancestors had believed that, our deep ancestors, we would not have made it to the century we are in. It would not have happened because they had to solve the problems of living. And problem solving, when you have never approached that problem before, requires imagination. It requires tinkering and innovating possibility. It takes a sense of, I know that feeling inside, I know there's a solution, I just haven't found it yet. And holding on to what is true about us and has been true about us for hundreds of thousands of years, because our prototype ancestors, you know, as European American and you in Europe, we have Neanderthal ancestry. They stuck around for 500,000 years, and they were able to find ways in a very difficult environment to thrive long enough to meet our Homo sapien ancestors and have babies. So we have this in the core of our being. It's not up to somebody else to do. You know, we can't abdicate responsibility because it means abdicating the very fabric we're made out of. We can't abdicate and give away this extraordinary nature that we have. You know, we've kind of gotten dumbed down and we've been put in little boxes, starting with our schooling. You know, you have to go grade at a time, and we may be boxed in by the job that we have, but they don't suit the fullness of who we are. There's a wonderful equation that, it sounds like a not creative thing, right? An equation. But there's an equation that I hold to, knowing that there's hope in this equation. Peter Russell, who is a brilliant mind, did a lecture that I attended. He was talking about the 100th monkey. We've all heard of the 100th monkey, where you have this sudden insight. He says, well, there's a formula for that. And the formula is the square root of 1% of a population. If the square root of 1% of the population of the entire planet, which is 8,500 or so people, really step into living 24/7, 365 days a year in the new way, we can have a meta paradigm shift. Now, many of us, we waffle in and out of it. Ordinary reality pulls us back and we forget, and, but 8,500, even if we go wild and say, oh, it's going to take 8,600, that's a doable number. And if each one of us just does our part to open up our lives, to dream ourselves as big as we're meant to be, to fall in love again with the environment around us, even you city dwellers. I taught with my partner a course one time in Montreal in the middle of winter. And, we were on the 7th floor of a building, and you couldn't be further away from nature at that point. And from the natural world, I should say. And we had them make offerings. So we had a slice of bread as a plate, and we told them to save a little bit of their lunch. And we had a little bit of sweets that they could take out. And after lunch, they bundled up, went down in the elevator, and they were to find a tree in the city. Usually they're in those little cutout places in the sidewalk. Go and leave that offering and tell that tree how it impacts your life. All of these people lived in Montreal. Share with that tree from your heart how good it feels to pass that tree in the summertime when everything is crazy. How good it feels when you see a squirrel in there or the birds flying into that tree. Share with that tree what that experience is like for you, and leave that. And the tree probably won't eat that, but all the other critters will. So they went out and they did the task, and they came back and they were like, we heard from our host, they usually do their classes in the country. And in the winter, we happened to be in Montreal proper. He said, we never thought about how our shamanic work could fit in the city. And, when we recognize that we are part of nature, nature is not just a background for human activity. We are part of nature, that every part of it is precious, even the ones we don't like very much, like mosquitoes, It's still a precious part of nature. They feed the birds. There's always a reason for that being to be here. And so as we remember those things, and each one of us will remember a different part first, but as we remember, we fall back in love with life. We fall back in love with the preciousness of our physical body, which is only here for the twinkling of an eye. My great-great-grandmother says, even if you live to be over 100 years old, she says, once you cross over where I am, it will seem as though just snapping your finger. And she says, she often talks about the gathering basket. She, the garden trug that people have when they cut flowers. She says, make your life like a gathering basket. All of the experiences, whether you judge them good or bad, put them in the basket, consciously put them in the basket. She says, because when you cross over, that's the richness you will have to savor. You will no longer have a nervous system to experience the world. You won't smell the smells you like. You won't see a sunset. None of those things will be possible when you cross over. But she says, if you've done a good job of filling that basket, you can savor all of that, even when you don't have a body. And that to me is so powerful. It's so beautiful and powerful, because there are things we wish we could press the pause button for in life. the parts where we were gravely ill, or the part we lost somebody we loved, or, you know, whatever it might be. We wish we could just hit the pause button and, or fast forward, you know, fast forward on your remote. But the truth is, all of those things continue to mold us and make us. We don't arrive at adulthood all done. We arrive at adulthood with a whole new bag of tools to continue growing, to continue molding ourselves like clay and allowing the world to mold us too. We need to allow that interface where we are working on ourselves, but also we allow the world to work on us, the world to open up more of our compassion, the world to teach us how to love more deeply, the world to teach us how to savor beauty in a deeper and deeper way. So that when you have gray hair, you are not winding up your life, but you're experiencing a growing richness, that that garden trug that you carry, that gathering basket, is full and rich. It's full and rich. And to me, nurturing ourselves in that way sort of begets wanting to nurture what's around us, and vice versa, because nothing is just linear in our world. So we get filled with nurturance. We want to pour that out into someone else or the world around us in some way, and then it splashes back on us again. You know, it's a round world. If you send something out, it's bound to get you.
I love that. And I love the story about the tree. And it's actually made me think about a tree which sits right in front of our house. And I've always loved it. But I've never actually told it how much I appreciate it being there. And perhaps it's time I find a way of doing that. I think that's a really nice thing. Now, I do very much love trees, and out in walking with my dog in proper countryside, there are certain trees which I will greet and say hello to, and dare I say it, they get a hug. So much so that Teddy, my dog, has started to hug trees. And this is a recent thing that he's started to do. So he sees me hug the tree, he comes along and he stands up and his paws go around. And today I was heading for one of my favorite trees, and I said to him, should we give the tree a hug, Teddy? But I promised you, he was already there doing it. I just hadn't noticed. So this is something that I'm learning. I am learning to show my appreciation. And, you know, the thing is that we can say how ridiculous, but if we think about that being an expression of an emotion, which is gratitude, and emotion is energy, what we are doing is we are releasing positive energy into the world. And of course, from a shamanic tradition, everything is alive, and the tree certainly knows what's happening. And whether or not you buy into that, or there's that funny expression, whether or not you connect with that idea of everything being alive and having a consciousness of its own or not, it's certainly the case that emotion is energy. And if you're releasing positive emotion, that's a good thing, and it benefits all of us. So that then is an important way of looking at things. So you're talking about the importance of gratitude, really, and how gratitude helps us to connect with love. And regular viewers to this channel are not going to be unfamiliar with that concept. I guess the next question is, for those who feel that they are not creative because they have been told that they are not creative, because the product that they produce in terms of attempted creativity isn't good enough, because it's not professional, because it's not this, it's not that. How do we awaken that creativity within people who have lost touch with that creativity?
I think beginning to think of it as an energy instead of a result. I think of all those things, paintings, operas, novels, all of the things that we classically think in our culture as this is the product of creativity. Here we go. And it's usually for sale. That is not creativity. That is the byproducts of creativity. And just like I'd like to say, you wouldn't intentionally buy food to nourish your body that was full of byproducts. Don't buy the idea that the byproducts of creativity are creativity itself. Those are the evidence, like footprints in the sand, or it's winter here, so the footprints of the snow, of people who have walked a path, or critters here that have walked a path and have left behind signs of the journey. So when we begin to, unpack that in ourselves, because it's really a kind of heretical thought, because we've been taught a particular thing about creativity. But when we set that aside and go, oh, it's the energy. I know how I feel when I try this, but then I'm disappointed with how it turns out. Okay, because you focused on the byproduct. If you were excited doing that, you're on the right track. Because when you're in that place where you're out, it's really like being outside of ordinary time space. When your creativity is really humming, time passes at a completely different rate as it does when you're sitting in an office cubicle. Because you lose track of time. I lose track of time. I lose track of, is it time to get up and use the toilet? Is it time to have food? It's none of that is important in the moment when that energy is just open. And creativity also, creative energy, gives back more than you expend. If you really surrender to it and let yourself play with materials, play with color, do whatever it is that you would have done when you were 3. You'd have colored clay, you'd have paper that you were drawing with, and try drawing with your other hand so you can't make it good. Just play with the energy. Give yourself permission to reawaken that energy that's been restrained by the opinion of other people about what your work looked like, or the internalization of their perspective, where you go, oh, that's not that good. It is good if it fed you while you were doing it. If you felt your creativity open up and we'll use another horse metaphor, gallop through your life, you were doing it right. And if it's something that you love to do, a particular kind, well, then you could take classes and refine your technique if you want. But technique and creativity are different things.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's something that's a conversation I have had, it seems, hundreds of times with clients. And the key word you used was play, because I always say, let yourself play. And if you let yourself play with ideas and you let yourself try different things without getting hung up on the fact that you haven't got the skill to translate the vision into the reality, it doesn't matter, because otherwise you're performing an abortion. You're not actually ever going to allow yourself to develop the skill because you're not good enough. And that's tragic, because you're cutting your energy off. So it's about playing with ideas, and then thinking, okay, so where do I start? How do I start? And then see where that takes you. And I think whether it's in the kitchen or in a studio, whether it's a music studio, in the garden, whatever it is you're doing, even if it is problem solving, if that's what you excel at, that takes tremendous imagination and vision. So we need to allow that to happen, because that's where we are alive. And if we can't do that, the life is not there within us.
I would completely agree. I would completely agree. And to also let go of outcome is one of the hardest things we have to do in life, in creativity, and everything. You can have a powerful intention, and then you have to trust the process. It may lead you, that's the thing about creativity, it may lead you down a path that you did not originally think was the right path, or a path you never thought of. And then let go of the outcome of what it's supposed to be. Those words of, well, it's supposed to be this way. No. Let it be what it wants to be. It's kind of like choosing ahead of time when you have a child that they're going to be a lawyer. And then training that child to be a lawyer from the time they're an infant. It's a crazy idea. It's an absolutely crazy idea, because you've now stifled all of that child's possibility. So if we let go of the outcome, it's like raising that child to be a healthy human being and let them explore and let them figure out what it is gives them joy. And all of us deserve that for ourselves. And that's actually making me a little weepy. Whenever you hear the truth, sometimes it makes me, makes tears, first of all, run out of my nose, and then they run out of my eyes. So when we let go of outcome, we are giving ourselves maybe more permission than we got from our parents. Because, I like to think it's never too late for a happy childhood. Never too late. So give yourself what it is you most wish somebody else had given you. And that includes everything. Includes if nobody's ever brought you enough flowers, you need to buy yourself flowers or pick them somewhere. Whatever it is, give yourself that gift. That when we do that, we are telegraphing important information to our subconscious, which I kind of think of living here. As imagine I'm pressing my belly beneath our screen here, but that is the part of our mind that was created and started to be created in utero, because there's now a discipline called pre and perinatal psychology. Fancy that. So we started to get wired in a certain way, and we perceived the world, and we made decisions about ourselves and the world before the age of 7 that may very well not be true. So when we do things that take good care of us, let us be joyful, let us be playful, we are telegraphing that new programming, because we're using all of our being. It's not just a thought, it's a feeling, it's an action. We are telegraphing to that part of us new information about us, new information about the world. And so as our perceptions change, the world around us changes. We change, the world around us changes. Because, Volkswagen, a long time ago, I was in advertising ages and ages ago. And at that point, Volkswagen had a wonderful ad series for the Beetle, where the ad was perception, reality. So the perception was, it was a funny little hippie car, and the reality was this, right? Well, the truth of the matter is there is no perception and reality. Your perception is your reality. It creates it all the time. So as you change your subconscious beliefs, because just changing them up here in the conscious mind will not work. You have to change them in that subconscious mind. And when you do, you live differently because you perceive the world and yourself differently. And I love the idea that we can continue growing as long as we're alive. And we probably grow after that, but I don't know that for certain yet. So that we can be exhilarated and discover new things and discover new ideas and new ways of doing things, that exhilaration can transform how we live our days. Because it's not just enough to be alive, it's expressing that living energy, expressing it by trying to squeeze the last bit of that living energy for all it's worth. And for me, creativity is a part of that.
Indeed. So now, if you are thinking about your creativity, wanting it to be unleashed, wanting it to grow, the book that we are discussing is Shamanic Creativity. And I think it's a wonderful place to start. Funnily enough, last year, I think around this time, I also gave a talk called Creativity, Your Link to Divinity. And if you are interested in that, you can always message me as well. So I will be putting a link to the book in the description box. And Evelyn, if people wanted to contact you, how could they do that?
They can do that through my website, which is spiritpassages.com.
And I will make sure that that also is in the description box. And I just want to thank you for being with us today.
Well, it was a pleasure. I want you to have a good evening because it's evening there, and I will get on to midday here.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching. Next time, we are going to be talking about sacred oils. Until then, goodbye.